Hey YouTube, welcome back to EagleX TCG, and today we're coming at you with another bit of Gundam card game content, and for the subject, we're going to talk about how to best prepare to beat Green-White Gundam Wing. Cue my intro. So, whether you have your fair share of things to say about the Gundam Wing deck like myself, or whether you think it's the greatest deck of all time, it's safe to say that Gundam Wing has one of the biggest spaces in the meta in terms of representation. Honestly, Gundam Wing was the very first series that got dubbed and shipped to the US, showing up on Toonami and introducing most millennials like myself to the franchise. Now, for some people, this instilled a seed of super strong nostalgia that never quite faded away, and for other people like myself, I basically watched it again, or tried to watch it again multiple times as I got older, and I was like, wow, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this anime, but the mechs are fire. Double O is Wing done right. Look, I may have my thoughts about the series, but the deck definitely has way more concrete value than the opinions on the anime. So we're going to hop into that, and we're going to talk about the ins and outs, how you best build against it, and how you best pilot against it, and hopefully add just another piece in your arsenal to combat the meta when you go to your next locals, potentially regionals, or your new type challenges coming up. So yeah, right before we hop into that though, I want to say, if you like this sort of content, make sure you like the video and maybe even subscribe, because we are getting closer and closer to that magical 10,000, and it would be much appreciated if you could join. All right, let's hop into this breakdown. Okay, so as per usual, we're gonna go starting off with a brief synopsis of the deck. Now, the Gundam Wing deck is of course a green-white deck, and for the purpose of this video, we're going to talk about the most common version of the deck, which is going to be the deck that ramps up and stabilizes / clearing the board with Gundam Wing 0. There are some alternative routes, like you could play more of a lower to the ground Shenron list, but that is not the list that's constantly being represented when this shows up in like Top Cut for the most part, so I will focus on this one. Eventually, once we're done with the complete meta unfolding of this series, we should be going to like some tier 1.5 decks and giving them spotlight, and then I'll like come back around to the Shenron build, because that's more of a specialized build that touches lobies. But before I put more time into that, the purpose of this deck is to do a couple of things. You have multiple stages of what this deck does, and the first stage is ramp and defend. This really is going to be playing out your blockers, such as Ilfrits, such as Zawarts if you have them, really just trying to make sure that your opponent can't get any early cheeky damage to your EX base or your shields, and then on top of that, you may even be playing out a 6 HP shield base, yeah, to be able to protect your shields and hold them off more. Now, while you're doing this, you also have a couple cards that really do get you closer to your goal, and that actually goes, pretty much every deck plays bird mode. Bird mode is just going to come down and make an EX resource, allowing you to be further up on the level and cost curve. And then on top of that, some people do tech in first contact. I know that's a little controversial, but it is in there. And then last but not least, you have the combination of Gundam Death Scythe with the duo pilot. It doesn't have to be the duo pilot, but we'll just put Gundam Death Scythe here for now, and we'll talk about the duo pilot later. But all three of these cards will help you turbo out your top end, which is where the deck really goes off. So the first stage is ramp and defend. Don't die, get them resource counts up. That's really the first stage. Now, the next stage is overwhelm, and this is pretty much the stage where you're landing bomb after bomb after bomb. It starts when you start pairing your death sights with your duos and start clearing and ramping at the same time, but you kind of continues when you start playing things like Wing Gundam and pairing it with Hito Yui, attacking active mode, and then committing breach. Actually, I say committing breach, but I guess that kind of does still fit, committing breach. And this is the part of the like curve where you're taking out guys on the board with Death Scythe and Wing Gundam, and you're also dealing some damage to their shields because of breach. Now, the last part of the equation is generally going to be the Gundam Wing 0, which is going to come down, deal 3 to literally everything that is level 5 or lower, and then it even has high maneuver. So if you link it that turn, if you have the resources, you're going to be punching immediately, and it can't be blocked. However, you also have the fact that even if you don't have the pair or the link, or you can't link because you're at exactly 8 resources or a mixture of resources or EX resources, you're going to be able to go in and kind of start wreaking havoc next turn. Now, the thing about this deck is that it is a race against time. Whether you can get yourself enough time to get to your top end, or your opponent can clock you before that time limit kind of expires on them having easy turns. Because for a lot of the Gundam Wing players game, you are doing a fat load of nothing. You're playing a blocker, or you're passing, or you're playing a card that ramps, but these aren't really proactive moves. So for a lot of these decks, you are just giving them like 3 to 5 free turns before you start actually playing things to the board that impact it and really can be seen as threats. So that's pretty much where this kind of goes. And yeah, I mean, that really is just pretty much where it goes. That's the stages of the deck. You really do just have your defensive turtle phase, and then you have your like war dog phase, and then your opponent just has to try to fight you through the first phase and hopefully close you out before the second phase, or as you reach the second phase, or maybe just like a turn or two into it, because there really aren't too many turns after that in most cases. So now we are going to go over to our next part, which is essentially going to be how to best build versus Gundam Wing. And yeah, we're going to teach you all the steps you can take before you even get to the event. So let's hop over there. Okay, y'all. So one of the main things about building against this deck is that while it's not going to be as restrictive as the decks that can beat the, you know, green, blue, one-year war aggro deck, this is still kind of a matchup based deck. And what I mean by this is that your deck has to be able to go aggressive enough to stop this deck from reaching its top end. Because I'll be clear with you, if a Gundam Wing deck reaches Wing 0 with like 3 shields left, it's going to, in most cases, be fairly hard for you to recover and actually get the game out. Because in a lot of cases, you're going to hit the Wing 0, it's going to deal 3 everything, and they'll hit a second Wing 0 the next turn in a lot of cases, and then bam, you're sitting here with like nada. And that can get really, really rough, especially when these guys start just taking 2 shields from your return, and then they still have other cards to potentially play if they're not gassed out. So realistically, you need a deck that can go fast. But it's not just about going fast. In a high degree, it's also about going wide, because when you only play one major threat a turn, they can keep up the pace with just blockers. They can play an Ilfrith to your one little body. They can play as a Wart to your first body. They can play an Ale Strike to another body. If they're teching Freedom, they can go even higher on that curve. If they're playing Striker Pack, they can go like a little in between with there. The point is, this deck is capable of 1-for-1ing your threats with a blocker if you were only playing one valid threat per turn. So you really do want to go a little bit wider. If this deck is saturating your meta, which it very well could be, like I said, it's one of the most popular decks, you really do have to make sure that you can go wider than just one threat a turn in most of these cases, because the deck is just built to be defensive, you know. Now the next part about this though is we've talked about having to be fast, we talked about having to be wide, but the next part about this is the Wing 0 paradox. Okay, and the Wing 0 paradox is very, very, very important, mainly because the Wing 0 comes down and it deals 3 to everything that's 5 or less. Now obviously the straightforward answer would be to just run things that are above level 5, but to be honest, if you're not playing in the mirror, very few things get above that level. In this current meta, when you think of things that are above level 5, what comes to my mind immediately are most played probably Banshee. Banshee is going to, if you're is going to be there, and then after that it kind of comes to like tech cards. You've got Sinanju, you've got Freedom, you've got Justice. These are all cards that are going to come down and just be too thick in the level department to be hit. But everything else in the game does get hit, and that is why it is so important to break the 3 HP threshold. There's a lot of cards in the format that do get around that 3 HP threshold. When you're looking at it, just in terms of, again, cards that are currently floating around the meta, you have cards like the Gundam LR from the starter deck this is going to have 4 HP, and it has repair. So if they can't swing it on at the same turn, you will likely be able to just take a shot at their shields and then just heal up a damage afterwards. You have cards like Ilfrith that sit there with 4 HP. That's a very, very, very good card. It's a blocker and it survives wing. There's actually just a fair amount of cool cards that do get around this, but they're kind of more fringe. There's a bunch of cards with 4 HP, and it really just depends on your deck. However, I will say that having 4 HP bodies does hurt wing, because once you get to a certain point in the game, wing is how they stabilize. Wing 0 is how they stabilize, and being able to have bodies survive that first thing means that if they do play it out of desperation to stabilize, but you keep 3 bodies on the board, they're probably actually going to get folded in the next turn or two. It just kind of is what it is. So 4 HP is very important. Now, a lot of you guys also know that there is going to be a kind of section about this, that a lot of good cards have 3 HP. Gun Cannon, the Rizal, probably a lot more. I mean, you have like your Gelgoog, you have a lot of stuff that's going to pretty much just not survive it by like just exacties. However, this is where pilots come in, because there's a lot of pilots that will help this out. Gun Cannon can literally just be given a Sayla or an Amuro, and automatically it's at 4 HP, and that's going to help it survive wing and then potentially do some damage next turn. You have pilots that can go under things like anything that just bumps you from 3 to 4 is really going to help you. So a lot of pilots are just going to sit there and make it a lot harder for wing 0 to just wipe your board. Now, I think that it is important to understand that a lot of the good cards of the format do get immediately swept by wing 0 without a link. Sometimes even with a link. Anything with 2 HP, so all these little 1 costs, Char Zaku 2s, like there's a lot of Zawarts, a lot of things will get one-shotted by wing 0. And so the thing is, if you're cooking with momentum, but they're not at like 1 shield or less, and they hit you with a wing 0 and you lose your entire field, you're automatically put on notice, because you probably need to close the game out in the next 2 turns before you get overwhelmed. It's going to be kind of an uphill battle. Now, the last thing I want to say is that a lot of these cards, the thing you have to also worry about is if they're beneath level 4, right? Or they're level 5 or less, then you do have to just understand that your opponent could high roll into double wing 0. They could wing 0 you one turn and take away half of your HP. You get your swings in for the following turn, and then the next turn they hit you with a second wing 0, annihilating your entire board, because most players don't play cards above the level of 5 in many decks. If they do, they're techs. So that kind of becomes a little bit of a problem, but that is the wing 0 paradox. You have to make sure that you can build boards that can tank that 3 ping to all, or else you will get folded by the pressure. Now, the next part of this, and I think the final part of deck building, are the checkpoints. Normally, your first checkpoint in trying to win the game is dealing 3 damage to the EX base. Then you're just trying to get a certain volume of attacks through. But if you get met with a base, in most cases, it's going to be a simple 5. This is like, you know, a Char Zaku paired with a Char. This is a Gundam LR paired with like pretty much anything that's not Amuro. There's a lot of things that will make the 5. This is Rizal paired with pretty much anything. However, the main issue here is that this deck specifically needs to go late. Therefore, it probably will be, if not, it should be running the 0-6 desert base, underground desert base, which is going to change the breakpoint. So you want to make sure that if you're expecting to fight a lot of wing, that the 6 HP breakpoint is not outside of your reach. And that is Armor with Gundam, luckily one of the most paired combos in the game. That is going to be Char attached to any Gelgoog. That's going to be important. There's a lot of cool things that you can do, but getting up to that 6 HP threshold is going to be how you clap through the shield, so that you can do the normal, which is flooding the shield with small attacks or whatever attacks you can muster to hammer it down. And those are kind of the 4 points of this. You literally do have the fact that you need to be able to go fast. You need to be able to go fairly wide, so if anything, you can swing around the blocker if need be. You have to worry about the board clear that will normally be coming as soon as they hit 8 resources, unless they brick. And then you have to also worry about the 6 HP bases coming into the mix and setting you up to have to deal with a different breakpoint. So next, we're gonna actually talk about what you need to do when you're at the table. So So hear me out, hear me out. It is that time. If you're still watching, that means you're probably digging the content. And if you're digging the content, I would implore you to make sure you hit that like button so the video survives, and subscribe and help EagleX TCG get to that magical 10,000 subscriber benchmark. But at the same time, if you want to see me nerd out and do other things that I can't do on a TCG channel, such as play video games, talk about manga, talk about anime, really, go over in the description to EagleX and just give that a subscription as well. Check that out, because that's going to be where I stream and whatnot, and I think you're going to have a good time. So yeah, when it comes to playing against this deck, as we talked about, pressure is king. You are essentially on a clock. When the Wing Zero deck reaches their end game and starts doing all the things their deck was building up to do, there's not really much you can do to interact with it. Their bodies are super tall. You generally have to expend multiple cards to get rid of one body, which can be a little taxing on the hand that you built up that late in the game, or better yet, the hand that's been depleted that late in the game. So you are on a clock. The faster and earlier you do your damage, the better, because like I said, outside of playing some blockers, for the first couple turns, you're not gonna have much resistance. Then they get to a point where, you know, they might be putting a Hito Yui on a bird mode and swinging over something. You eventually get to the point where they are playing Death Scythes with duos and just auto killing anything with HP 6 or less on your side of the board that turn it comes out. And then sometimes they'll end up playing the Gundam Wing and just swinging over your bodies in active mode before they can swing, keep the aggro off of them, but also dealing you breach, edging you closer and closer to, you know, losing the match. But then eventually they play that Wing Zero, ping 3 to everything that's applicable, and that's when your game starts sliding. So this clock really starts ticking halfway into the game, and then once they play that first Wing Zero, you generally have a certain amount of turns left. Now, some people may be wondering, how do you shorten this clock? And the realistic thing is actually clearing their board. You are racing them, but you need to pay attention to a couple things. And that first thing that I'm going to talk about is that once the Death Scythe with Duo hits the board and you're looking at a 6/6, once Wing Zero hits the board and you're looking at what I believe it's a like 7/7 or something like that. Once Wing Zero hits the board and you're looking at like an 8/9, these are all things that you have to be just cognizant about, is that you may never get these guys off the board. To be fair, Death Scythe, because it comes out and has that first strike and punishes, and then Wing Zero, since it's going to come down, clear some things, and if they do pair, it's going to swing over with high maneuver. If they don't, it's going to swing with high maneuver anyway. These are all cards that have a bit of stickiness. Now, the only reason why I'm not going to fully include Wing Zero in this mix is that Wing Gundam. Wing Gundam from the starter deck is going to attack you and hope to get rid of a body and breach. In most cases, that means it's taking 2, 3, maybe even 4 damage. And if Wing Gundam takes that much damage, you are able to chip it the following turn. So just by design, Wing Gundam generally has less longevity than Death Scythe and Wing Zero, especially when Wing Zero is paired. However, though, once these guys get on the board, you have to expend so much to get rid of them that sometimes it's not worth it. So you do have to race around them. But you know what you shouldn't be racing around? Wing Gundam bird modes, small Death Scythes if they play them, Ilfriths, Ale Strikes, anything that comes out that doesn't have more than like 5 HP, you should actively be working to get those off of the field. Because what lots of times happens to these players that lose against this Wing deck is that they spend so much time trying to race Wing, and Wing is just going to be like deciding when they need to take a hit, when they need to block, and then they get you with the Death Scythe and they take your best card, and then you got to worry about, you know, Death Scythe being on the board, and then, you know, you're trying to race them still, you're doing high maneuver, you're resting their blocker, and they play a Wing Zero and they take half of your board. And then comes the terrifying part. You replay what you can if you have a link, and then you look up at the board and you realize, oh my gosh, there is a Wing Gundam bird mode with Hito Yui under it, a Death Scythe with Duo under it, an Ale Strike, and a Wing Zero. And next turn, they could very well follow that up with a Wing Zero, clearing the rest of your board, and then swinging with the rest of their board, literally dealing you like 3 to 4 damage. Or maybe they just swing with like 3 bodies and then leave an Ale Strike up. This is the problem. This is the thing that's really going to get at you. But hear me out, if you actively invested in killing that Wing Gundam Bird mode, actually invested in killing that Ale Strike, then they're going to sit there and be like, okay, Death Scythe, ramp, pass. Okay, Wing Zero, swing with Death Scythe again at something, pass. That's 2 bodies on the board instead of 3, instead of 4, instead of maybe even 5, and that means your clock is significantly more lax than it was before. So yes, you are racing them, but when they present an opportunity to get rid of a small body, do it immediately. That way, when they drop their bombs that you can do nothing about, they don't have a field around it to press game. This is the main key to beating Ramp Wing. Clear the bodies you can, ignore the bodies you can't, try to put down as much pressure as possible and make your board extra wide so that you can do this. Now there's one more hitch to playing against this deck, and that's going to be dodging the wing turn. Everybody has bodies in their deck that are going to naturally live Wing Zero's ability. However, playing them out as close as you can to the wing turn is very important. There are times where you're just gonna have to risk it for the biscuit and play out something with 2 or 3 HP, knowing that if they have Wing Zero, it's evaporated. But what really seals the coffin, nail in the coffin, is playing out the bodies that do have those low HP thresholds up until the point where they're nearing their 8 energy turn or their 8 resource turn, and that's when you slam down the guys with 4 HP, 5 HP, pairing them up to 6 HP or 5 HP. And that way, when they drop Wing Zero and it should be their get out of jail free card, it's hitting the board and only killing 1 out of your 4 bodies or 2 out of your 4 or 5 bodies, and that's going to allow you to have the steam to push for game afterwards. They're going to have to start swinging into you, and once Death Scythe has that first swing, it's going to be able to be chippable once it swings on something without first strike. Once Wing Zero has already swung over something and breached you, it should be chippable with the amount of HP it has left. So this is essentially where you need to be headed when it comes to beating this deck. Consistent pressure, clearing the cards that you can, fighting around the cards that you can't, and most importantly, preparing for that Wing Zero turn by setting up a board that has 4 HP or higher on as many bodies as you can, so that you will be able to survive and have a massive crackback turn. That turn can stabilize you, or stabilize them. If they wipe your entire board with Wing Zero, bam, they're stabilized. But if they play Wing Zero as a desperation to stabilize and they only kill 2 bodies out of your 3 or 4 or 5, well, 2 bodies out of your 3 is pretty good. That's actually pretty good. But 2 out of 4, 2 out of 5, then they're not really out of danger. In fact, you can potentially swing for alpha the following turn. So that is going to be a thing. So that is pretty much it on how you play against that deck. I do believe that this is a pretty comprehensive thing. Realistically, if your deck is slow, that's the kind of issue. If your deck is trying to operate in a slightly earlier space than them, chances are they're going to arrive at the same point as you at the same time, except their in-game cards are better because of the ramp. Or they're going to be a little slower than you, but their in-game is better and they're just going to outvalue you. Or worst case scenario, you just give them so much time, they high roll and you're just getting top end cards played on you while they still have 4, 5 shields because your deck is slow too. So you really can't expect to run, at this point, I don't think, a control deck in many cases that's better than their control. I think there are some decks, oddly enough, I think there is a white red brew that can kind of contest, but at the end of the day, I do still believe that their cards are stronger, not to mention that Wing Zero has high maneuver, so when you set up your wall of blockers, that card is still definitely going over their heads. It really is kind of a strong matchup to have to deal with if you're also a control or in-game kind of late game deck. So yeah, be fast, and then everything we just talked about so far. So with that being said, let's head to the closing. Let's talk about the matchups, and let's kind of move on from here. So when it comes to this, I would say that when you look at the meta, obviously there are going to be some decks that have a better matchup. Green, blue, 1-Year War aggro is going to play fairly well into this deck, unless you brick or you don't see like 1 to 2 Chars or something like that, like 1 Char, no Amuros. You could, like, it's really rough because if this deck sees 1 Char and 1 Amuro, you're probably cooked playing a green-white deck that's focused on ramp. The deck will simply put out too many bodies. It'll negate your first blocker with the Amuro. It'll swing over another blocker with Char, and then you have like a blocker and they have like 5 attacks and you can only block 1 or 2 of them, and then, you know, you're just kind of hoping they don't top deck another Gelgug and stuff like that. It's kind of rough. If they don't see any pilots, you can actually wall them pretty hard, because if you don't see any pilots, then once you get over their initial like small bodies, they don't really draw too much afterwards, and you can really kind of start pushing the envelope with breach and whatnot. And if you survive to wing 0 healthily, you're kind of clapping the entire like thing. Similarly, you kind of have the same thing with blue-red. If they can aggress you out of the game fast enough, they can really get it down. But most blue-red decks don't have high maneuver in them, so they can get kind of caught behind enough blockers. And while one singular wing 0 doesn't kill the deck, back-to-back wing 0s should wipe out almost everything that deck can play outside of Banshee. Wherein lies the problem with if the deck can last long enough. Now, then you get the white-blue blockers deck against the green-white, and green-white wing essentially has the most time against this deck. This deck generally can play a little aggressively if it draws body heavy and you start just turning everything sideways, but at the end of the day, it is a kind of more control oriented deck, a mid-range oriented deck, and it gives green-white wing too much time to set up, and they will generally reach their end game, start wrecking your field, start swinging high maneuver over your body, start breaching through blockers, and it becomes a nightmare if the game goes on too long versus wing. But the thing about this is, all 3 of those decks can just draw stupid. Like literally green, white, or like green, blue, 1-Year War aggro can just draw a bunch of 1-drops, an Amuro, and a Char, and just hose you down before you can even get to the end of the game. You could see a game versus blue-red, and they could just see like a 1-drop with Vesalius, and then go into, you know, another 1-drop, and then go into, you know, just all these small bodies and just peck you out of the game. You know, you play a blocker, it gets arrested by Amuro, they swing around it, and then you're just over here like, holy crap, I'm getting hosed. And yeah, it can happen too. Even the deck that you generally have the best matchup against, white, blue, can get there, especially if they're playing the unicorn variant. Like, you could literally just get hit in these points where it's like, okay, I'm just gonna end up playing out this Zawart. Okay, cool. Next turn, I'm playing out Ilfrith. Okay, cool. Oh, you're Gundam Wing, so you're not really doing anything? Okay, cool. This Ilfrith's going sideways. Next turn, and after Ilfrith goes sideways, I will play out like a Sword Strike Gundam, or just anybody really. And then the next turn, the Ilfrith's going sideways again, and then something else is attacking your life. Oh, okay, now I'm just gonna play out a Ale Strike and a Kira, and then those are all going sideways at you. And then they'll just turn everything sideways because they know for the first couple turns you're not doing anything. But then, dun, 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 you finally get to your end game, and you know, Death Scythe kills something along the way. Wing 0 attacks something with breach, but a lot of things, like once you put Kira under any sort of strike, pretty much, it's going to take a chunk of Wing 0 with it. And then something else is going to, you know, end up hitting Wing 0. Sorry, Wing Gundam, I keep saying Wing 0, but it's gonna hit Wing Gundam. And then you finally play Wing 0, and sometimes white-blue has bodies that aren't gonna get one-tapped, and all those bodies can go sideways again. So if they draw body heavy, white-blue can actually get the dub on Wing Gundam. So Gundam Wing deck. So that's kind of the thing that makes me kind of pause about it. Wing Gundam, like, if Gundam Wing decks get to the end game healthily, 3 shields minimum, 3 shields or more, they will likely take it over, and they will probably end you before that you can end them. But a lot of decks just have the ability to like brain off and just turn everything sideways and just hope it gets there. And for a deck that's tuned to be aggressive, it likely is. And that is why I feel like Gundam Wing decks are kind of the weakest out of the 3, as most of the other matchups have a good matchup and a bad matchup. Whereas this one just actually has matchups that it destroys if it high rolls, and matchups that it really gets hosed by if they just draw correctly. So that's kind of the thing. I do think one of the biggest things that people ignore, one of the hugest things that people do not take into consideration, is that you can't ignore all the cards they play. Ignore Death Scythe with Do Under It. Ignore Wing Gundam until it takes chip damage. Ignore Wing Zero. But you don't ignore the bodies before that, because those bodies will literally close the, they will turn you, put you on a 2-turn clock once big Wing Zero comes down, and they can all just start going sideways without fear of them dying the following turn. But if you clear those small bodies and then just race them once they play the bodies that have these massive HP stats, that's the way that you get under this deck. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. Let me know what you guys think about this video. I am, again, loving the support, guys. And realistically, as I said before, like the video if you like this sort of content. Subscribe if you want to help me get to 10K and see more Gundam card game content in the future. And just check out my links to check out the other quadrants of Universe X, whether that be Universe X where I play video games and stream, whether that be the Discord, the Patreon, whichever you like. So thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Later.